Pedro Grifol, you obviously know him well. What are White Sox fans getting?
Well, I met Pedro, I think it was 2012 or 2013. Actually, I think I met him maybe about 2010 very briefly. He was the farm director for the Seattle Mariners. And my brother Ken's son, Casey, had just got through playing 4 years of baseball at Cornell and was a real bright kid, and he interned 1 year for the Mariners because he was living up in Spokane. And Pedro hired him, and the next year he hired him as the assistant farm director. And I think I might have met Pedro then. And then Pedro wanted to get back in uniform, and there was no place for it, I think, in the Seattle organization. The Royals said, come on over and join our organization. He's a brilliant man and a good evaluator of talent, very, very organized, bilingual, which is, I think, important in today's game of baseball. And in 2013, the Royals were going through a tough stretch, and they kept calling me 4 or 5 nights in a row. We want you to be the hitting coach. We want you to be the hitting coach. And the first 4 nights, I said no. The 5th night, I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll do it for a month and see if I like it. And they said, we're going to bring Pedro in to be your assistant. So now I got to know Pedro. I ended up doing it in 2013 for 2 months. And I remember the first day on the job, we got Mike Moustakas, and he and I and Pedro, me and Mike, we walked in Texas for about 6 laps around the field at 2 o'clock in the afternoon so Pedro could get a chance to know Mike. And since then, they've developed a special friendship. Would you ever think of Mike Moustakas going to play baseball in Venezuela in the wintertime after he's been in the big leagues for about 4 years? Well, that's how strong of a relationship how he bonded with Pedro. He went down there, and it turned his career around. But Pedro was just a good guy. He's organized. He's very likable. I think he's going to do a good job. I was kind of saddened that the Royals didn't sign him, and I remember in my talks I called Jerry Reinsdorf one day and talked to him about him, and I said, if I was you, I'd hire him, but I hope he doesn't have that opportunity. I hope the Royals sign him. But I was not in the interview process. I don't know how it went with Pedro. I don't know how it went with the guy that we signed, but they opted to go another way, and I'm glad Pedro got an opportunity to manage. I think he'll do a tremendous job. I have all the utmost respect for him. And it was funny. I talked to Tony La Russa one day. Tony called me and he said, "What makes him a good manager?" And I didn't know what to say. And then I should have said, "Well, Tony, in your opinion, what makes a good manager?" This is after I hung up with Tony, and Tony would have said, "Well, I think the guy has to be able to do that." And I would have said, "Pedro can do that." Okay, what else makes a good manager? Pedro can do that. What else makes a good manager, Tony? Well, in my opinion, Pedro can do that and do it very well. So I think the White Sox got a good hire, and hopefully, I know he signed a 3-year contract. I talked to him today. He said, "Don't tell anybody." And 20 minutes later, my phone's going off the hook. That Pedro's going to be the White Sox manager. And all I told was my wife, and my wife does not follow Major League Baseball. So I guess it came out, and I'm very, very excited for him, and I'm very excited for Jerry in the White Sox, and I'm very excited about all the fans in Chicago because I think you got a good guy to manage your ball club.
That's so much there from the Hall of Famer George Brett. You mentioned some of the biggest names in the White Sox, right? You talked to Jerry Reinsdorf, you talked to Tony La Russa. When did you talk to Tony? Did Tony ask you about Pedro Grifol?
Tony called me about 3 or 4 days ago. I think Pedro had already interviewed once with the White Sox, and then he did the interview with the Royals after his first interview with the White Sox. He and his wife, Allie, had dinner with me and my wife, Leslie. We went to Eddie V's in Kansas City. He said he thought the interview in Kansas City went real well. The next day, he was going back for round 2 with the White Sox. Now, he already has a tie with some guy that's with the White Sox, Chris Getz.
Sure.
Chris, I believe, is the assistant general manager there now, right?
He is indeed. And then
he is indeed. And in fact, I got Chris into my country club in Kansas City when he was playing for the Royals. He was getting married to Nikki, and what a beautiful and lovely gal she is. And I have the utmost respect for Chris. And when Chris got released by the Royals, I think he tried to play one more. No, he went to the God, I think he went to the Blue Jays for 1 year, and then he came back to the Royals. And I always liked Chris. We always had a really good relationship. And when when Pedro told me that in the meeting was Haugh and Chris Getz, I'm going, well, that's good. They have the farm director. He says, no, George, he's the assistant general manager now. And Chris Getz, I remember Dayton Moore telling me one day, he said, Chris Getz is going to be a great GM in Major League Baseball one day. Chris has it. He has, I think, what it takes to be a baseball executive. And so when I saw that when Pedro said Getzy was in the interview, and then if he passed the second stage, his next one was going to be in Arizona with Jerry. And that's what I called Jerry.
So
Jerry and I were talking. It was, you know what it was? It was the night of the 40 strikeout game. Jerry and I have become good friends over the years. Eddie Einhorn was a good friend of mine, Jerry's partner. And I used to have dinner with Eddie a lot in spring training with Dennis Gilbert. And Dennis works for the White Sox organization, and Dennis used to be my agent. So I have a lot of ties to the White Sox organization in the front office. I don't have any ties with any of the players or anything, but the front office, I do have some friends and some acquaintances along the way. And that's what happens when you've been in Major League Baseball for, I signed at 18, I'm 69. So you do the math. I mean, God, how many years is that? 50 years.
Yeah, it's 51 years. People talk to George Brett.
51 years. Well, I've got a chance to meet a lot of people and have befriended a lot of people, and I'm very honest with people. And
that matters,
the conversations just started growing. And the next thing you know, it was after, and I know Charlie Lau, who is my favorite baseball personnel in uniform of all time. He's the one that helped me turn the corner and become a successful hitter. Charlie went to the White Sox, and he and Reinsdorf are good friends. And I didn't even think about Pedro, but when I called Jerry one day after that 18-inning game with 43 strikeouts, and I just said, Charlie Lau's rolling over in his grave. and basically that's all I said. And then he says, what about these hitters today, George? And, I said, Jerry, I don't know. I give up. I can't. It's getting hard to watch all the strikeouts. He says, this is just frustrating. Charlie is rolling over in his grave. And that was the conversation. And then when I found out it was going to stage 3 in the interview, I called Jerry again. And I think Jerry called me and he said, tell me about this Pedro guy. And then we had a conversation, and then Tony called me. So they're doing their homework just like every executive, every owner would do. They're doing homework. They want to get some scoop on these guys. And I don't think you're going to find a lot of negative scoop on Pedro. That's just the way he is.
We haven't heard any yet. That's amazing.
And, it's like being a presidential candidate. Somebody's going to start digging some stuff up. But good luck to you.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. So I think White Sox fans would even be interested in knowing that Tony was involved in this. And
well, I don't know how involved Tony was, but Tony called me. I still don't know. Tony wouldn't tell me his ailment or what caused him to resign or whatever. He said he knows, Reinsdorf knows, and his wife knows, and that's it. And I'm going to Arizona tomorrow, and I know Tony, I know Jerry. They have breakfast. Bud Selig, a bunch of baseball executives go to this little deli on Saturday mornings. I might stop by, Saturday morning and about 2 miles from my house and say, hey, who's buying me breakfast this morning?
Because you're a kingmaker.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
What can you tell us as we're talking to George Brett? And Jerry Reinsdorf so well. We don't really hear from him. His involvement, his anger, his passion, his love. Like, where is Jerry Reinsdorf at, both with Pedro Grifol and the current state of the White Sox?
Well, I think he was disappointed this year. He thought, they were favored to win the division, were they not?
Yeah, heavily.
Yeah, they were heavily favored, and things didn't work out. And I really don't follow anything outside of Kansas City. It all started, I think, when, USA Today and the local paper, they don't even put box scores in anymore. You notice that?
Oh, yes.
I have noticed that, George.
It's a crime.
I used to love to get up in the morning, and there's not many guys I follow in baseball on other teams. But now, in order for me to do that, I got to go to MLB.com, pull up, box scores, and I got to start clicking all these frickin' buttons. Just give me a frickin' newspaper with all the information I need.
You deserve that.
And, yeah, I mean, it's not that frickin' hard, is it?
No, sir.
Jesus Christ. I mean, it just drives me crazy. And they wonder why baseball is losing its popularity. I think that might be one of the reasons.
Because you can't
Newspaper people.
you sit over.
I agree.
In Kansas City, this is how bad our paper is in Kansas City. We don't get game results till the next day.
Yeah, I know. It's just on the internet.
I mean, you can get it on the internet, but what about, and I still get the paper delivered to the house, because I would rather read a newspaper than, I bring them on airplanes. I'll bring the newspaper on the airplane tomorrow, and I'll read the newspaper, and I'll do the crossword and the Sudoku and the Ken and the word search, and that's what I do.
Yeah.
But throw a box score in there once in a while, for crying out loud.
See, you're the kind of person that Jerry needed to hear from, I'm sure, about Pedro. I love that you decided to call him, and how was that call received when you call about Pedro Grifol?
Well, when I called, he called me about Pedro. I called him about the 40 strikeout game, that 1-0 game. I called him about that, and that was it. And then when he got to stage 3, and they're going, okay, tell me about Pedro, and he says, well, he was with the Royals, and Jerry's saying to himself, well, I just talked to George Brett 4 nights ago or 5 nights ago. They said, let me call him. He knows him.
Did you talk
to? How it probably happened.
Did you talk to Rick Hahn or Kenny Williams? You in touch with those guys?
No, I did not talk to any of them. I did not talk to either one of those two or Chris Getz.
Okay. So interesting. We're talking to George Brett here. So you like him, you sign off on him. George, I was obviously in Kansas City for 6 years. Everyone that I talked to said Salvador Perez. Like if you need a case study for why Pedro Grifol is great, look to his input and influence on Salvador Perez. Is that something that you would agree with?
Well, I would. He was the catching coach and did a lot of the game planning with Sal. For the years that I was there. And Sal's had a pretty good career. Sal, when he came up, I mean, who am I talking to? Who was in Kansas City? Who is this?
George, it's Danny Parkins. Do you remember me?
Oh, yeah, you were in Kansas City, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you were on the show.
Hi. Yeah, it's been a while.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no.
We had our ups and downs, George. It was rocky. It was fun. We never played golf together, though. We got to do that sometime.
Yeah, he was in charge of Sal. He was the catching guy. He was the catching guy, and he was in charge of every move Sal made. Every move Sal made from 2013 on, Pedro's been involved in that. And he was a good hitting coach. And in the off season, he lives in Miami, and he has MJ Melendez and another young catcher lives in Miami. I think Salvador is spending a lot more time in Kansas City as of right now. Probably he might be in Miami right now. Who knows? But I mean, these guys would go and work out with Pedro in the off season, and he's just a kind of guy, in my opinion, that people are going to want to do the little bit extra to get better because of him.
Oh, see, that's everything. We need that. We got players here in town that are not getting
to be there and content with their so-so frickin' batting averages and on base percentages and WAR and all that crap. Hey, all I care about is batting average, runs scored, and RBIs. That's all I care about. I don't care about
Hell yeah.